What happens when a late-night host ditches the script and lets the conversation spiral live on air? It turns into the center of controversy. Tonight, we're diving into one of the most awkward and tense moments in recent television history. Moment where Seth Meyers completely blindsided his guest in a way that left viewers watching with their hands half covering their faces. This wasn't your standard celebrity puff piece interview. This was a real-time unraveling, a lesson in how fast things can go off the rails when someone decides not to follow the expected playbook. So don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment because this story escalates fast, the late night. With Seth Meyers' studio had its usual buzz as the cameras went live nationwide. Seth adjusted his tie, flashed his signature grin toward camera one. But something in his expression looked different, sharper, more focused. Sitting across from him was Meghan Markle. She had just taken her seat posture flawless, smile ready. For the cover of any magazine, so Meghan, Seth said with his usual friendly tone, the same voice that's made him a late-night staple. I've got to ask about something that's been making headlines, your humanitarian work, especially your recent trip to Africa. What was that experience like for you? Meghan's eyes lit up. She had clearly anticipated the question. Oh, Seth, it was truly life-changing. Working directly with the local communities, witnessing the real, tangible impact of grassroots efforts, it reminded me exactly why I care so deeply about using my platform to uplift voices that often go unheard. The women I met were so strong, so determined to make change despite immense obstacles. It was incredibly inspiring. Seth nodded, listening, but his expression began to shift. That's wonderful. But I want to ask you something specific. During your stop at a school in Johannesburg, you made a speech about education access. Where did those statistics come from? The question hovered in the air a bit too long. Meghan's smile briefly faltered, but she quickly regained her poise. Well, Seth, those figures were drawn from extensive research conducted by my team, in partnership with several international organizations. The data is complex, but the key message is this: young girls deserve every chance to learn and grow. I completely agree, Seth replied. His tone stayed friendly, but his eyes locked on her. But when my own research team looked into those same numbers, they couldn't locate any international body that had published the exact statistics you used. In fact, the closest data we found suggested very different figures. Can you clarify where your team got their numbers? The audience picked up on the shift instantly. The vibe changed, tension crept in. The crowd grew noticeably quieter. Meghan's polished media instincts kept her calm, though her expression tightened slightly. Seth, there might be a bit of confusion. My team pulls from multiple sources, and depending on methodology, the way stats are presented can vary. What matters is that we're having this conversation at all. These girls need champions, and I'm proud to be one of them. Seth leaned in just a little. He looked more like a seasoned journalist than a late-night entertainer now. I don't disagree that they need advocates. But shouldn't those advocates ensure that what they say is accurate? You're speaking to thousands, maybe millions about important issues. Doesn't that kind of influence demand extra care with facts? The question landed harder than she expected. Meghan's carefully crafted smile became strained. She inhaled just barely, but it was visible. Of course, accuracy matters, Seth, but I think we're missing the larger point. Whether the literacy rate is 60% or 65%, what's important is that too many girls still lack access to education. That's the real issue here. But you didn't say 60 or 65%, Seth said. His tone was calm, but now there was an unmistakable edge. The audience began to shift in their seats, feeling the discomfort rise. You said 42%. And according to our checks with UNESCO, UNICEF, and the World Bank, none of them show anything close to that number for the region you were talking about. In fact, they all report much higher rates than what you claimed. A hush fell across the studio. You could almost hear people holding their breath. Meghan's face shifted surprise, maybe confusion, then something that looked like anger before settling into something more vulnerable. Hurt. Her voice trembled ever so slightly. Seth, I don't know why you've chosen to confront me about my humanitarian work on national television. I've poured time, energy, and personal resources into these causes because they matter deeply to me. If there's been some misunderstanding or error in data, my team will certainly look into it. But to accuse me of being dishonest about work, that I care so much about it, feels unnecessarily cruel. That word cruel hung in the air like a challenge. Seth's face didn't change, but something about his posture did. It suggested he wasn't finished. The audience stayed quiet. There was no laughter, no applause, just tension. I'm not attacking your passion, Meghan. I'm questioning your preparation. And I think it's fair to ask whether someone in your position, someone with global reach, should be making public claims on complex global issues without thoroughly vetting the facts. What you say matters. People listen. And with that kind of platform comes responsibility. Meghan's composure was slipping, subtly but undeniably, and the cameras didn't miss it. Her hands, once resting gracefully in her lap, were now gripping her fingers gripped the armrest of her chair. Her breathing grew just a bit more noticeable, and when she finally spoke, there was a clear defensiveness in her tone that hadn't been there before. Seth, I've dedicated years to these issues. I've visited these communities, spoken to experts, and seen the challenges up close. If your goal here is to sit and pick apart statistics instead of focusing on what really matters, that says more about your priorities than mine. My priority, without hesitation, Seth cut in, is making sure that when someone with your reach speaks about these things, they're giving people the right facts. Because if the information you're sharing is wrong, it doesn't just damage your reputation, it hurts the credibility of the entire cause. The air in the studio thickened with tension. Even the camera crew seemed to realize they were capturing something explosive, something that would be replayed again and again. Meghan's complexion paled slightly. When she replied, there was a real tremble in her voice. I can't believe this is even happening. I came on tonight to talk about meaningful work, things that are genuinely helping people. And now you're using this moment to try and embarrass me over what amounts to a footnote in a speech. Seth didn't flinch. His tone was still calm, but now edged with sharp precision. If accuracy is just a footnote to you, Meghan, maybe that's the root of the problem. Those words landed like a punch. Meghan's eyes widened, her polished composure faltering. Her mouth opened, then closed, like she was reaching for something to say, but nothing came out. The audience sat frozen, the moment holding them hostage. It was a confrontation between fame and responsibility, one that no one expected to see live. That's completely unfair, Meghan finally said, her voice unsteady. You're twisting my words and turning this into something it's not. I've never claimed to be a data analyst or a researcher. I'm just someone who cares and uses their voice to help. Seth wasn't backing off. But caring alone doesn't cut it, not when you're speaking to millions. When you stood at that school and gave those numbers, you weren't just expressing concern, you were presenting facts. And if those facts are wrong, what happens to your credibility the next time you speak out? The silence that followed was heavy. Meghan's response made it clear she was rattled. You want to talk about credibility? Fine, let's talk about how you're treating me right now. Is this really the kind of journalist you want to be? Attacking people who are trying to make a difference in the world? Attacking? Seth raised an eyebrow. I asked you about something you said publicly. That's not an ambush. That's accountability. And if follow-up questions feel like an ambush to you, maybe you weren't ready to defend your statements. The heat in the room kept rising. Meghan's hands shook now, a blush crawling up her neck, impossible to hide under the bright lights. When she spoke again, her voice held a desperate edge that made some in the audience shift uncomfortably. This is exactly why I pulled away from public life. I came here hoping for a real conversation, one that could highlight the work that matters. Instead, you're tearing me apart over technicalities that completely miss the bigger picture. The bigger picture is that words matter, Meghan. Facts matter. With a platform like yours, getting things right isn't optional. When you get it wrong, it doesn't just affect you, it affects every group out there trying to do good. So now you're saying my work isn't legitimate? Meghan's voice rose slightly, the polished calm cracking. I'm saying credibility comes from being accurate and consistent, Seth replied. And this isn't just one statistic. There's a pattern here. Like when you spoke at the Women's Empowerment Conference and said you personally funded scholarships for 30 young women. Journalists tried to verify that, but one could find any record of those scholarships. The room went still. Even the camera lenses seemed to stop moving. Meghan's expression shifted rapidly: shock, then anger, and something else that looked like fear. How dare you question my charity work? You don't know what I've done in private, what I've sacrificed to make a difference. Then help me understand, Seth said, now more curious than confrontational. Because when reporters dig for details, they find dead ends. When they ask for evidence, they're met with silence. When they contact the organizations you say you've worked with, they either don't respond or say there's no record. So tell me, how can we trust your word when nothing backs it up? That question struck the core of everything. Meghan's tone softened, but not in strength. It was raw, more youthful, more fragile, yet laced with frustration. Maybe that's hard for you to understand, living in your world of ratings and sound bites. But some of us believe in doing good without needing recognition. Seth's expression hardened. That's convenient coming from someone who often speaks publicly about their charitable efforts. You can't have it both ways, Meghan. The accusation hit hard, so hard it shattered Meghan's already fragile composure. Her calm demeanor finally crumbled and tears welled in her eyes. Her voice quivered as she replied, "You're being incredibly cruel. You're targeting someone who's just trying to do something good and turning it into a spectacle. Is this really who you want to be?" Under different circumstances, her emotional plea might have softened the blow, but Seth remained unmoved. I want to be known as someone who asks the tough questions, someone who doesn't hand celebrities a free pass just because they say they're doing good. If that makes me look cruel, I'll accept that. Can you accept ruining someone's reputation based on partial facts? Meghan fired back, now openly crying. Can you live with damaging causes that matter, just to score a few points in an interview? I'm not ruining anything, Seth answered, calm and direct. I'm holding you accountable for public claims. If those can't stand up to questions if asking damages, then maybe the real issue lies in the answers, not the questions. The audience was silent, stunned, as Meghan, a global public figure, broke down in front of the cameras. Her makeup ran with tears, and her desperate effort to hold herself together was becoming harder to watch. "This is a nightmare," she murmured, barely audible, more to herself than anyone else. "This is exactly what I tried to avoid. It's why I walked away. Because no matter how much you try to help, someone's always waiting to tear you apart." Seth's tone didn't change, but his words cut deeper. Maybe it's not about people tearing you down. Maybe the problem is that the image you built can't survive real scrutiny. The metaphor landed with brutal force. Meghan's expression collapsed, and suddenly she no longer looked like the polished icon she usually projected, just someone caught in a web of consequences she couldn't control. Every moment of her unraveling was caught on camera. The trembling in her voice, the raw emotion on her face as she struggled to speak. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "No matter how I answer, I'm made to look like a fraud." Her words lingered in the air like smoke from a fire that had consumed everything. Seth leaned back slightly, his posture softening, almost sympathetic. But the journalist in him didn't. "Let go of the moment. Then don't defend yourself," he said, quieter now. "Just be honest, right now. Tell everyone watching exactly what you've done, actual work, actual documentation. Give them a reason to believe in you." Through her tears, Meghan looked up. Something had shifted. She seemed ready to stop pretending. Her voice, stripped of all performance, was painfully sincere. "You want the truth? The truth is, I want it so badly to make a difference that sometimes I got ahead of reality. When people expect you to be the perfect advocate, sometimes you say things that sound better than what's actually happening. I talked about commitments that hadn't been finalized, projects still being planned like they were already done." Her confession was heartbreakingly honest. The audience, which had watched with morbid curiosity, now seemed genuinely moved by this unguarded moment. Still, Seth pressed gently. When you talked about scholarships for 30 young women, what's the actual story? Meghan exhaled, her shoulders heavy with defeat. I had talks about funding scholarships. I met with organizations, discussed possibilities. But the funding wasn't confirmed. Nothing had been awarded. I spoke too soon, too hopefully. And the stats in your Africa speech? Seth asked, now more careful than confrontational. I remembered those figures from a report or briefing, she admitted, but I didn't double-check. I trusted my memory and I was wrong. Her voice cracked again. I've been wrong about a lot. It was an emotional contradiction, both infuriating and deeply human. Someone with global influence was admitting to misleading the public, yet doing so with a sincerity that made it hard not to empathize. Seth seemed to recognize the magnitude of what was happening. He paused, then asked slowly, Do you understand why this matters, Meghan? Why people need to trust the things someone in your position says? I do now, she said softly. Every word matters. Every fact should be checked. People were counting on me to be truthful, and I let them down, not just this audience, but everyone who believed in the work I said I was doing. Seth asked the inevitable next question. So where do you go from here? How do you repair trust after this kind of damage? Meghan took a shaky breath. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, a simple, very human gesture. I honestly don't know. I don't even know if I should try. Maybe the best thing I can do is walk away and let people who really know what they're doing take over. Or maybe, Seth offered, for the first time sounding more like a guide than an interrogator, you start by taking ownership of your mistakes. Setting the record straight means addressing every false claim publicly and then showing through real actions. Not just words that you're committed to making a difference. The idea seems to ignite a flicker of hope in Meghan. You think people would give me that chance after tonight? After everything that's come out, do you think there's a way back from this? Seth takes a moment to think. People are usually more forgiving of genuine mistakes than ongoing dishonesty. But it would mean being fully transparent from now on, no more exaggerating. No more talking about projects before they're done. No more relying on good intentions to make up for sloppy details. That sounds terrifying, Meghan says, letting out a shaky laugh that turns into a quiet sob. Being held accountable for every word, being that careful all the time. That's what real advocates live with every day, Seth replies. People doing the real work in these communities can't afford to get the facts wrong. Their credibility is everything, and they protect it fiercely because one slip-up can erase years of progress. His words hit hard. Meghan visibly begins to grasp just how off track she's been. I've been pretending to be an activist while others have actually been living it. That's the most honest thing you've said tonight, Seth says. Now the real question is, are you ready to stop pretending and start doing the actual work? For the first time since the interview began, Meghan turns her eyes directly to the camera. Her face is streaked with tears, but there's a sincerity in her expression that hasn't been there all evening. I owe so many people an apology, to the organizations I claimed to support, to the communities I said I served, and to all of you. Watching, I'm sorry for not being the advocate I said I was. The studio falls completely silent as she goes on. I don't know if I can ever earn back your trust, but I want to try. I want to begin again, to do the real work, to learn from those who've done it longer and better than me. I want tonight to mean something, not just because I got caught, but because I finally understand what advocacy really demands. Seth nods slowly. It's a start. But remember, words come easy. You're clearly good with those. The challenge will be proving them with actions that are consistent, visible, and true. I know, Meghan says quietly. I know it'll take years to prove this moment mattered. That I've learned something from being called out like this. It's going to be hard, humbling, and probably humiliating sometimes. Good, Seth says sharply. Because the work you've been claiming to do is exactly that: humbling, difficult, and yes, embarrassing. If you're not ready to feel those things, you're not ready for the work. As the interview nears its end, Meghan looks completely drained but also more real than she's looked in any public appearance in years. The tears have dried, but the damage to her carefully crafted image is done. There's no going back. Just before the cameras cut away, Seth adds one last thought. I hope everyone watching realizes this wasn't about tearing someone down for ratings. This was about accountability. When someone has a platform like Meghan's, asking hard questions isn't cruel, it's necessary. Meghan gives a small nod, looking like someone who's just survived a wreck shaken, but oddly relieved to still be standing. Thank you for asking the hard questions, Seth. I needed someone to, even if I wasn't ready to answer them. The interview closes with both Seth and Meghan visibly spent from the emotional intensity. The audience breaks into applause, though it's unclear if they're clapping for the journalism, the truth, or simply the raw emotion they just witnessed. What started as a standard celebrity interview turned into a powerful reminder of how fast things fall apart when smooth sound bites meet real scrutiny, when image is tested by truth, and when someone finally has the courage to ask the questions no one else will. Be sure to subscribe for more stories like this one. And leave a comment. What moment shocked you the most in this interview? Was Seth too harsh, or is this exactly the kind of accountability we need in celebrity culture today? Let me know your thoughts.